Everybody. Um, Making this video early in the morning. I haven't recorded anything in a while. I figured it was time. I'm a parent with two kids, so having time to record stuff has just not been conducive lately. But I wanted to talk about like safety tools. Venture into this shit show. Um, I've kind of changed my impressions. A lot of this is due to just the changing nature of Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPGs generally. um, so I've noticed that traditionally, older gamers like myself, we played these games with people we knew, right? People you met from school. Usually, so we all started is finding someone at school that played Dungeons and Dragons, which was a feat in and of itself, right? Because you couldn't just be like, "Hey, does anybody like D&D?" Because back when I was a kid, that was some nerd shit. Get your ass kicked, right? Or at least picked on. So you had to kind of be subtle, kind of figure out who were the D&D players, right? Like kind of like we say, "Do you party?" Right? Get that reference. But you're basically playing with people you knew, right? And because the group was small and hard to find, you were not ever in really demanding over who you played with, right? Um, you were willing to accept pretty much anybody, right? And if that person, was usually an oddball, which they often were, you just kind of dealt with it, right? Because you had no one else to play with, right? Now, well, to sort of build on that topic, the consequence of that is that you have social relationships with these people before you play, and you're willing to give people a lot of leeway, and you would certainly never demand or impose, like, I can only play these kind of sacred things, like I have these triggers and I can't play with y'all if y'all don't do these things. Like, you wouldn't put demands on the other players ever, right? It would be sort of rude and counterproductive. um, but now people are not playing with friends and people that they know. They're actually playing or meeting people through Dungeons and Dragons, right? Through online apps and these kind of things to find people to play with, right? And they don't have a sort of pre-existing relationship with those people, right? So like now my group, we're all sort of, oh, I met, I guess initially one person through work and got into the group, and we've been playing for over 10 years. Damn. Um, but you kind of vetted socially prior to that, right? Whereas now people are just sort of getting into a group with a bunch of strangers and a DM, and any freaking amount of weirdos can sneak in there. And so, I do DM for occasionally for some of my students or former students who are a lot younger, and some of the stories that I've heard from them, as particularly female players, are like, oh yeah, I never really thought about that. Like, when you're going into these environments, especially as a female gamer player, there's some weird dudes out there that are just gonna, they can be the dungeon master, or they can be other players that are just kind of socially retarded and don't know how, don't know how to fucking act right. I don't know, like sending shit to girls and use your imagination, right? So in that context, yeah, I think safety tools, maybe just not to say, I hate even saying it because it sounds so fucking stupid, right? But in that context, you might have some sort of process to be like, hey, if somebody's bothering you, let me know, as the DM, let me know and I'll fucking get rid of them, right? But like the idea that people will go in, like, I don't think this is actually happening. I think this is one of those issues that's just kind of made up so that people can sort of virtue signal about it. But I don't think people are actually going into game. I could be wrong, but I don't think people are going into games like, I just want to let you know, DM, that one of my triggers is fucking, I don't know, cats or something. If there's any cats, like, when I was 9, I was scratched by a cat, some stupid shit like that. And you're like, please have no cats in the game. It's a trigger for me. And really, like, I mean, if you're a DM, I thought, well, I don't know what other DMs do. In my case, I would be like, really? Oh, well, I'm glad you told me because my whole campaign is full of cats. It's like there's a part where you get turned into a cat and you have cat sex, and I'm glad you told me it's probably not the game for you, right? I just find some reason to sort of push that person out and fuck off, weirdo. Like, I don't want to play with you. And that's, I think, what would happen in real life is if you keep going into these, if there's a player who's going into groups with these weird demands, people are just not going to want to play with you, right? They'll find either the group will break up as an excuse to not play with your weird ass, right? Or they'll find reasons to push you out, right? It's a very weird phenomenon, but again, this is because you're playing with people who you don't actually know, right? And I suspect that part of this is just the changing nature of the TTRPG hobby. Like it's become much more one, it's not, you don't find players face to face anymore. And I think it's becoming more of a substitute for socialization. If you get my drift, like people don't socialize in the same way as before. I mean, there's way more weirdos now that are just dysfunctional humans. And this gives them some way to socialize, right, in ways that they're just not used to doing. And so I guess what I'm getting at is like the part of the transformation of this hobby is that people are being drawn to D&D for a chance to socialize, right? And that's a much different sort of dynamic than previously, right? Than certainly my generation, right? Is that you're looking for a game, not just to sort of nerd out and indulge in your sort of, kind of nerd fantasies and dreams that you have, your imagination. But now you're seeking out this game to have a chance to socialize and to talk to people and to be in that sort of group dynamic that the tabletop games, TTRPGs create for you, right? So in that like I think that's what's influencing these things like safety rules, right? Is that one because people are now doing it because not just for the game and because they like fantasy, like you're Tolkien nerds like we were. Um, they're doing it because they want to socialize, right? And this gives them that platform, and it's a much different motivation, and that results in a lot more sort of goofiness, let's call it, a lot of silliness. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. Do you think like the TTRPG hobby is just becoming, I said, well, the nature of the TTRPG hobby today is just much different, and it's sort of an excuse to, or a platform to try to find socialization, right? Um, I don't know. It's an interesting thing to think about, right? And have any of you, if anybody sees that, have you actually had an experience with a safety tool, you know, that was applied in a way that you felt merited its existence, right? I'd be curious to hear that as well. So sorry for not posting in a while. It's almost Christmas, but I'll try to get back on it, trying to find time.